Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of the Mystics on a Mission show. I am your host, Hannah Beer, and I'm so excited because today we have a very special guest. I'm here with Brandi Bernoskie. Hi, Brandi.
Hi.
So I wanted to have Brandi on the show because she is a web designer. She designs really beautiful websites, and she's also an archery instructor. And I thought that was so cool. I've never had anybody on the show to talk about something like archery, so I really wanted to have her on the show to ask her a bunch of questions about it because, as many of you know, I am a priestess of the divine feminine. I love goddess archetypes, and one of my favorite is the Lady of Communion. So you can think of the Lady of Communion as the goddess that is in the forest. She's the one who's walking around with a bow and arrow. She's the one who's focusing on the targets, shooting at the targets. She's the goddess of horses, of unicorns, of pine cones, of, trees. And she's this forest mystic. And so usually in sessions with clients, I'm working with this goddess when my clients are in need of direction, when they're in need of focus, of discipline, of a healthy balance of masculine and feminine qualities. So archery is something that I tried a couple of times at medieval markets, and I always thought it was so cool because it really is this embodiment of masculine and feminine qualities where you have to surrender, where you have to be so aligned at the same time. And I feel like oftentimes just goal setting and all that kind of stuff can be so incredibly confusing. Like, do I focus on it a lot? Do I surrender? Like, how do I achieve a goal? Should I have goals? Should I not? And this goddess archetype really helps us with this whole confusion and helps us become an integrated being where we're not just totally in our feminine or totally in our masculine, totally setting goals or not setting goals at all, but she's really helping us embody everything. So, Brandi, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you about archery and to see if maybe you see some correlations between this goddess archetype and what you do as an instructor and archer.
Yeah, huge amounts, honestly. I'm really excited about this conversation, so thank you.
Me too. So I introduced you just very quickly. I would love it if you could tell us more about what you do. Like, what's your work about? What do you do in your day-to-day?
So the day-to-day, I run a company called Alchemy and Aim. It's website strategy and development. So we work with a lot of different clients, and actually we do a lot of work with great clients who are doing spiritual self-help things. So Brene Brown, Marianne Williamson, Laverne Cox, Kate Northrup, and just, being part of the support team that they need to help get their messages out and into the world. So that's my day-to-day. I have a team of people who work with me, which I love. It's great creating jobs for people and creating opportunities and possibilities for everyone we work with. I'm one of those, I love connecting people. I love connecting my clients and anyone who really shows up at my doorstep. It's just really rewarding. So that's the day-to-day. And then I guess maybe the sometimes day-to-day, but often evening to evening is spent either in archery or actually working on my podcast. So with the podcast, that's called The Next Leaders. A friend and I founded that together. And it's just talking about what modern leadership looks like, especially what does feminine leadership look like. And we play a lot with the different feminine archetypes and goddess archetypes there to be able to better understand how we can embody different qualities in our day-to-day that aren't linear or masculine. Not that those are bad things, but just a different perspective on it. And then with the archery, I've been doing that for 4 years now and been an instructor for 3.5. Just got my second level of certification there. I do a type of archery called barebow, which is very challenging. And I just started a website called Archer's Curve. And really the goal of that is to create a space for female archers to tell their stories and to encourage women to get into traditional barebow and Olympic recurve archery, because it's it's easy for women, what I've noticed, if they're dating someone or married to someone who's in archery, to get involved. But there are those of us who have gotten involved simply because we are drawn to it. And I really want to give more women the tools to become involved if they are drawn to it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I would also love to ask you a little bit about your journey. How did you start out? How did you become a designer?
So I do less design these days. I mean, I've always done very little design. We have a lot of designers we actually work with um, on our team or on our extended team. But I actually started out as a blogger. I was writing my own blog. I had a lifestyle blog and then I had a food blog on the side. And so it really came from my love of writing. I have a background in physics as well and mathematics. So I naturally knew just enough code to make me dangerous and to be able to break my site repeatedly. Um, but that's what I was doing is I was blogging and then I was kind of, adjusting the things that were on my website in order to get them the way I wanted them to be. And very quickly, it kind of spiraled into friends contacting me and asking me for help with their websites. Could I redesign it for them? Could I code it for them? Whatever it was. And suddenly I realized that I was getting enough inquiries to leave my full-time job and start freelancing. And so I freelanced for a year. Well, I freelanced for 2 years, hit that peak where I was like, okay, I was making six figures, but I was just maxed out with my time. And that's when I started hiring people. And suddenly there was a company and I was a business owner and not just a freelancer anymore. So yeah, it was a very unexpected and yet somehow still natural progression to things.
Mm-hmm. And so that full-time job you quit, was that in physics and mathematics?
Not quite. I was working at a nonprofit doing earth science education outreach work for NASA. So a little bit, yes, but I was actually writing mostly. I was doing a lot of tools, teaching tools, and just articles, just to, again, get the public interested and help them better understand what earth science looks like.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So there's always kind of been this love for writing, this love for producing content.
Yep. Love for
Beautiful.
creating.
Mm-hmm. And what made you, okay, how do I want to phrase this? So I love science and I feel like I have a big sciencey part to me, and I chose also to not do that professionally. So what made you focus on writing more? Was it that you were guided there, or was it a conscious decision to say, don't want to do physics and math, I want to do like the creation thing?
Yeah, I think it was that as much as I loved physics and mathematics, I was always interested in the ideas behind it. So I did one bachelor's degree and then I did a second one. And the second one I did was in physics, philosophy, religion, and a minor in mathematics. Because I liked diving into like not just how do I crunch the numbers, but what do the numbers mean? Like what do they really mean at the core of everything? So I was always trying to find that kind of like the unifying thread in the world. And I was thinking I was always looking at even physics and mathematics as something that reveals the divine to us. So it was just natural for me to want to engage the ideas more so than the calculations. Like what does it mean? Like I did an internship in astrophysics, like knowing that there's this dark matter in the universe that's bending light, like what does that mean? Like what does that mean for us as a species? Like what does that mean for us as individuals to know that these things exist? Maybe it doesn't mean anything, but maybe it means something. So I ended up in a graduate program in San Diego doing philosophy of science and science studies, and really kind of looking at more of like how do we understand science and how do we engage with it. And that's where my heart just kind of sang, we're in the ideas. So I was just naturally writing there, and it was just an obvious path to then do more with writing for me, and do more with kind of public communication when it comes down to science and the big ideas behind science and what that opens for us.
Something I loved about what you just said was that physics and math reveal the divine to us. I think that's so cool. So sometimes people ask me, oh, Hannah, you're so spiritual. Like, what's your definition of God. And I love quoting Albert Einstein, who was a very religious person from what I know, but he said, God is the sum of all laws of nature, like the ones we know and the ones we don't know of. And science helps us trace the steps of God. And it's really interesting. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, and science is great at kind of providing different perspectives on the divine. I always like the story of all of the men feeling the different parts of the elephant, and they're like, "Oh no, it's long and thin. Oh no, it's flat and like large." And it's about putting all those perspectives together. It's not necessarily about having a single perspective and holding fast to it, but realizing that there's this much larger fabric to the cosmos that we can understand from different ways. I mean, there's a human perspective, there's a scientific perspective, there's multiple dimensions to getting into it.
Awesome. So you studied physics and math and philosophy. Then you worked for this organization. You went into blogging. You had 2 blogs, and then you got all of those requests for web design. And now you are running your own company,
Yep.
and you have other people also working with you. That's awesome. So how did you get into archery?
So archery was something that I had first tried out in like a summer in the Poconos. Just, at one of those like hotels that simply had it. And I remember my mom taking me down there and telling me, we were shooting, and she's like, you're kind of good at this. And everywhere I looked thereafter, I was always like looking for archery. My first degree is from NYU, and there was no archery in New York. Like, you can't run around the city with bows and arrows. And I didn't know that you could that was kind of like early internet days too. So I didn't know how to find things like that. But then when I went to Rutgers, was still looking for archery, and it was just conflicting with my classes. Went to San Diego, San Diego is home to one of the Olympic training centers for archery, and conflicted with one of my core requirements for my degree. So it was kind of like I kept looking for it, and it just never worked out. And finally, when I moved to Washington, D.C., I had this job, which provided me money, and I had this all this free time in the evening that I didn't know what to do with myself. So I remember calling up a friend and being like, let's try some different things together, and booking an archery lessons for the 2 of us. And she was a teacher at a school in DC, and she had a colleague who lent us bows. And so we would drive out to a little range in Maryland and just stand there and, shoot our bows, and had no idea what we were doing. And got to the point where we needed instruction. Well, we needed our own equipment first, and we needed instruction. So we bought our own equipment, learned a little bit more there. And then finally I hit the point where she was, we were having fun with it, and she was kind of curious, but I really became passionate. So I started at that point to seek out instruction, and put myself in a course, and got to know other archers in the area, was encouraged by them. And I think within probably 6 or 7 months of starting, I loved it so much that I knew I wanted to get certified to help teach it. And what I was noticing is that there were very few female instructors. A lot of the instructors were men. And I mean, let's just face it, women learn from women differently than they do from men. So I wanted to kind of provide that safe space for women and kids to get instruction and be able to ask someone. So that's how it kind of emerged. And it just became a really full-blown passion very quickly.
So where do you live now? Do you still live in DC?
I live outside of Washington, D.C. at the moment. I'm moving actually at the end of this month. I'm moving, I'm gypsying for a couple months. And then I'm going to move up to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is another phenomenal home for archery in the country. It's home to Lancaster Archery, which is one of the biggest suppliers in the United States for archery equipment. And they've actually been incredibly supportive of the work that I've been doing with Archer's Curve. So I've been filming videos to tell women's stories, and they've just pretty much sponsored that, provided me with the videographer who's helping me like tape things and edit. So it's been really, really fantastic. And they're good people over there.
Awesome. So did that inspire you to move there? What was the intention behind moving to Pennsylvania now?
That's the idea. Yeah, it's a couple different things. Puts me closer to home in some ways. I mean, home's New Jersey, but it's a little closer than DC. But yeah, I mean, Pennsylvania and the Lancaster area particularly, there are 31 archery ranges within an hour. So that's a lot of stuff constantly going on. And that's, there's different types of archery ranges. So there's indoor ranges and then there's outdoor. And for outdoor ranges, there's two types that I engage in. One's called field and one's called 3D. And field is phenomenally challenging and also meditative. You're pretty much walking through the woods, going from target to target and shooting at paper targets. And 3D is like 3D foam animals. So they provide a kind of a different sort of challenge because you're just like, where's the spot that I'm supposed to hit here? And it kind of gets you into that warrior hunter mode without ever having to harm anything. And so I enjoy that because it allows me to be in that space. But I don't, I'm just like, I'm hitting foam. That feels good to me.
That sounds like so much fun. I would also love to know, what do you love most about archery?
I think what I love most about archery is what I also hate most about archery, and that is the mental challenge that it provides. It forces you, if you've never really formed rituals for yourself, to learn how to ritualize your process. It's absolutely a process-oriented sport. It's about being in your body, and it's about clearing your mind. I mean, over and over again, like clearing my mind of the mental blocks, of the demons, of all of that negativity, that all gets just drenched up when I'm in archery. So it hasn't been easy. Like my second year in archery, I went through some severe setbacks and I didn't know if I'd be able to continue, but I was also really determined and knew I loved it. There's something really magical when you get in that space that like the universe just opens up to you and anything is possible. And you're so positively sure of yourself. Like you just have no doubts. It all fades away. And so the reason I keep doing it and the reason I keep going through the points that are challenging is because every time I do, like you slay one more demon. You quiet one more negative voice inside of your head. And I love it, but like I said, I hate it at the same time because it's exhausting sometimes and it's disheartening sometimes, but building that perseverance in you is, you just know that it's going to carry you through not just archery, but everything else in life too.
Mm-hmm. So what were those setbacks that made you feel like maybe you wanted to quit or maybe like this couldn't continue? Were those more the mental blocks that you just described or outside forces? What made it difficult for you?
It was a little bit of both. I had never really had the challenge of, so being in like my sport growing up was theater. So I never quite had to deal with the competitive challenges of a sport. And the fact that, frankly, some people are mean and they'll say, bad, nasty things. And those things kind of get stuck in your head and they start rumbling around. And if you wonder if they're true, but a lot of archers go through something called target panic when suddenly it is like a panic attack almost. I went from being a really solid shooter and shooting scores in my first year that most people take years to work up to very suddenly not even being able to hit the paper because I was so, it kind of felt like the burdens of the outside world were on me and everyone's opinions were kind of inside of my head. And I think it just like unleashed all of the negativity within me too, of like, I can't do this. I can't go on. Like, how am I supposed to get through this? So I mean, I went from being a solid shooter to suddenly like just not even being able to shoot targets at all. Like I had to take time off from targets. I'd go and we do this thing called blank bailing, which is literally like a blank target. Like there's nothing on the target and you just shoot to shoot. You just shoot for form. You shoot for the process. You don't shoot for results. You don't shoot for accuracy or anything else like that. You just shoot to feel it in your body. And we are often so goal oriented in our lives that to simply do something for the process in and of itself can feel a little ridiculous to us. So this was just, it had to be entirely process based for me for a long while. And it still, it still is. Like I put myself in very high pressure situations these days with archery simply because it causes me to break down. People would be like, why do you do that? Like, why would you bother putting yourself in a high stress situations knowing that you're probably going to break down? And it's because every time I break, I get stronger. Every single time I stand there on the line and I confront those demons, they get weaker. I get stronger. And it's been, like there are times when it's been ridiculous where I'm like, I've missed the target in a competition once. And I'm like, that's okay. Because somehow when you suddenly live out your worst nightmare, it doesn't have any power over you anymore. And it's gotten easier and easier every time that I do that.
Mm-hmm. This is so beautiful. I just recently heard something from a very brilliant psychotherapist called Marisa Peer, and she said that perseverance is when you love yourself. And I feel like that really shows in the story that you've just told, how you just stayed. It was hard, but you stayed with yourself. You didn't abandon yourself. You just kept shooting. You just kept shooting. You just kept showing up. And that's what it takes sometimes. I feel like, this story plays out in so many different areas of our lives, in so many different situations, whether it's business or relationships or just anything where we think we have the handle on it. We're so happy about ourselves because things seem to be going well. And then something goes sideways and everything breaks apart. And there's so much healing in this breaking open because it means that we're ready for the next step. It means that we're ready to release some more stuff. And it's at the same time pretty challenging to then still embrace it, to say, okay, all this muck is coming up. All those voices from outside of me are driving me insane. Even worse, the beliefs I hold about myself are really, really stressful and painful for me right now. But then to stay and to work through it is incredibly brave. And I really do believe that having perseverance is really loving yourself. It's not just being with yourself when things are going well, when you're, achieving your goals exactly the way you want to do it. But, when just stuff happens and you're still staying with yourself. I think that's really beautiful.
Absolutely. I really love Elizabeth Gilbert in Big Magic. She talks about just showing up to write and letting the demons confront her in that. And it really is, success is not built simply on natural talent. It's built on ritual and on process and on habits. And it's built on the fact that you show up even on your worst days and you still go through it. And you get stronger because of it. And I mean, I'm just also a big believer, like you lean into the spots that are hard in life because that's where your growth is. So I love leaning into my discomfort and putting myself in situations where I'm like, oh, why did I do this? But every time I do, I grow.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. I wonder, how has archery and everything you're learning in that process affecting you in other areas of your life?
I think it's given me more confidence overall. Being a business owner, obviously, there's a level of self-awareness that comes with that as well. It's a kind of, I feel like it's hyper self-awareness. Like I'm always growing as a business owner, but I'm also always growing as an archer. And it's allowed me to not just be like, it allows me to be in the discomfort of life, of relationships. Um, I feel like it's made me more willing to be vulnerable too. And, really, like I said, it's taught me the value of having the rituals, having those points that you come back to, and really having those points during the day on a day-to-day basis when you're in your body. You're not in your mind, and you're not in the future, and you're not in the past, but you're just in your body in the moment. There's something very grounding and connecting about that.
Are there any other ways you are getting out of your head and into your body in your life?
I do, meditation. I do a lot of meditation. I do meditation with archery too, a lot of visualization with archery. It actually did help me at one point to work with a sports psychologist who gave me a lot of meditations and visualizations, and even, a little bit of hypnosis, which was less about, actually like hypnotizing me, like to where I didn't know what was happening, and more about just bringing my body into a relaxed state where the suggestions felt true, and just feeling them in my whole body rather than just something that you tell yourself in your head, but like it's that body knowing. So, but yeah, I use meditation for that same reason, and visualization for the same reason. Just, it gets me like right there in the moment, just thinking about like what's possible and what I know I can do.
That's awesome. What lessons did you learn as a result of having picked up archery and having stuck with it for the past 4 years?
Oh my gosh. Oh, I feel like there are so many lessons. How to persevere is one of the biggest. How to create a mental routine is another big one, and I think that's carried over into my business as well. Being able to have those mental routines that like either help clear up energy, or help move it, one way, shape, or form. But like things that move energy through my body have been really useful. Oddly, there's a lot that archery has taught me socially about being in my like divine feminine around people. That's not what you would expect, likely. We always I talk a lot about the practice of archery, but there is the community of archery too. And one of the biggest gifts that has given me is like teaching me how to be in that divine feminine, and the kind of the divine courtesan and the sexual energy as well. And not necessarily to go out there in that way, but to in that creative capacity that it possesses, that kind of like first, second chakra, building capacity, and how to bring that into what I do there as well. So for me, like archery is a very kind of like, it does, over time you find the ways that it integrates all the energies of the chakras together, but it's a very first, second chakra thing for me because it grounds me down. It's that creative capacity, that sexual capacity of birthing things into the world that didn't previously exist.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. You also mentioned earlier that you shoot 3D targets and paper targets. Okay, so I'm a vegan and I love animals. So
Me too.
what's your stance on shooting animals?
So this is one that I've a position that's evolved in time for me. I'll say this. My parents and I, we name the animals. We feed the animals, we name them. We have probably 20 deer that we've named. We haven't named the turkeys because they move too fast. But my mom names every generation of deer, and like she can actually call the deer to her. Like that's the type of like people we are. But I also do understand hunting from a wildlife management perspective of, being able to control a population so that the population can thrive. It is important. Like I would never hunt an animal ever. It's just not, I love shooting foam, and that's the furthest it will go for me. But I do understand the different perspectives, and it's been a wonderful intellectual challenge to be around people with very different backgrounds, people who, for some of them, the meat they hunt is the only meat that they get during the year. It's simply, food sourcing for them. And in certain areas of the United States, access to really great produce is very limited. And that is something that I'd love to see change in time. But it opens you up to a really wide variety of different perspectives, and being able to see people for who they are and love them, even if they are very different from you. A lot of the people I'm very politically different from a lot of the people I shoot with, but we find common ground. And that for me just fills me with hope that I can find common ground with people who I might otherwise in a Facebook, post or something might completely clash with, but I can find common ground with them and see the beauty of the individual that they are. So, and that's, the same thing has been true, is like, I've just been offered a bunch of different perspectives on hunting that never occurred to me when I was growing up. I always thought hunting was a bad thing, but in some ways, it can be helpful. I have a friend of mine who hunts wild boar in in Georgia, and it's a duck sanctuary. And he helps hunt boar there so that the ducks can thrive, because otherwise they would die. They would just be repeatedly destroyed by boar and alligator they have there. So it is a very, it's never the way I'd love to see things done. And I'd love to see better ways of controlling the population beyond that. But I understand it a little bit now, more so than I did. And it took time too. It wasn't an immediate, I was immediately very repulsed by these conversations people were having and very upset by them. And I still am. People sometimes want to show me photos and I'm just like, no, that's just not cool in my book. And there's a lot of people I disagree with, but then there's a lot of people that I can see why they do what they do and just understand it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. I so get what you mean, because my boyfriend is a forest scientist and hunting is part of his job. And that's the first thing we usually get is but he's hunting. You're a vegan.
Yeah.
How come you're not fighting all the time? And he also explained it to me because so we used to live in Germany together, and he was working in the woods there. And so his job was to control the deer population. And so in Europe, there's just so many deer. It's incredible. Just the population has exploded. The wolves are coming back, but still, it's hard for big wolf packs to really roam around Europe because their natural habitats are so small these days. And so there are so many deer. And my boyfriend explained to me that when there are so many deer, the trees just can't grow. And then basically all the beetles, all the smaller animals don't have any habitat at all. So if there are too many deer, not only are we missing out on all the smaller animals, simply because there are no trees to offer them shelter and a home, but also when there's just too much of if the deer population is simply too big, usually it goes like this, and then it crashes down. So instead of just a couple of deer dying, huge populations of deer are, lost all of a sudden, simply because there's not enough food for them, because, the winters are so harsh, and because they have, there's simply not enough space and food for all the deer. And so he says that he gladly shoots a couple of deer to make sure that the population just doesn't, drop like that all of a sudden. Like, he doesn't want that many deer to die, so he'd rather kill just a few, in my eyes, like, I totally agree with you. I really, really, really wish there were a better way. I'm just not an expert. I simply don't know. And I actually see a lot of love in that intention of doing the deer the favor of shooting just a couple so that more of them can survive. It still breaks my heart, but that's stuff that I had to learn too, because I simply didn't know. From my vegan perspective, I was like, don't kill animals. I used to always say, when I was a lot younger, I used to always say, eat pussy, not animals. And it was so silly. I mean, it's really cool when you can expand your point of view and let those other views in, and to not just think, oh, it's all lovelessness. Because a lot of it might be, but some of it might not be.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is caretaking. And I know in Virginia, there's been instances of like certain deer being like sick in the population. And it's, I know hunters who go out looking specifically for those deer that are sick, so the whole population isn't affected, so it doesn't all collapse. And it comes down to that. It's about caretaking and creating balance. And yeah, I mean, I really do hope one day there's a better way, but I also do understand the perspective of being able to do it, and the perspective of, for some people, it being part of like their nutritional value of like what they can get for themselves. So yeah, it is. Archery's been really wonderful about really in allowing me to engage with a lot of very different people, and then also finding people who are very much like me, and finding people who are very much like me but do hunt, or very but much like me and would never hunt. And it's expanding. It's very horizon expanding.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. I would also love to ask you a couple more questions before we close our conversation. So I'd love to know from you, what's a dream you still want to realize?
I would, with regards to archery, I would love to shoot in one of the World Field Championships. So those happen every year, 2 years, I think every 2 years, in different parts of the world. So there was one in Italy and one in South Africa this year, like 2 different types. I would just love the opportunity to be in a foreign country doing archery and getting to know other archers from around the world. That would be amazing.
That sounds so cool. What's a book you love?
Oh my gosh. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. That's my favorite.
Me too.
I always go back to that one. It's just so simple, such a great, easy read, but it reminds you of like the whole interconnectedness of the world.
It is a beautiful book. Awesome. What's the best advice you've ever received?
A very good friend of mine is a phenomenal barebow archer, and he wins competitions all over the place. And he and I were shooting on the line next to each other in a competition earlier this year. And he reminded me, he's like, I never shoot for the score. I shoot for the feel of the shot. And he's like, that's what you need to do. He's like, you need to shoot for the feel of the shot. Don't worry where it goes, because if you're shooting for the feel, if you know that everything feels right and the process is right, he's like, it'll go where you need it to go. And I think that's true, not just of archery, but of life as a whole.
That's very deep. I love that. Oh, such a good reminder.
Yep.
Beautiful. So we're at the end of our conversation. Thank you so much, Brandi. It was really awesome talking to you.
You too. Thanks for having me on here.
You're so welcome. So for everybody who would like to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
So my website company is alchemyandaim.com. For archery, archerscurve.com is the best way to see what we're up to and find out more information and contact me.
Okay, sweet. And is there anything specific coming up for Archer's Curve? I know that there's this video series that's in the works. What can we expect?
So there's a video series in the works. I'm in the middle of putting together an online affiliate shop and a really great guide for beginning archers so that they better understand the different types of archery and what they need to get started. So I'm really stoked about that. And then I actually get to teach for a whole 5 days in August to a bunch of, women. So I'm really, really excited about that opportunity as well.
Awesome. That sounds fun. Cool. Everybody else, head on over to hannahbeer.com/show so that you can check out all the links, see the show notes to everything. I would also love it if you could give Brandi and I some feedback. Let us know what your takeaways were. Are you going to try out archery? Do you agree, disagree with anything we said today? We would love to hear from you guys, and talk to you next week.